It's my honor to chair the first series of talks, the first series of keynote speeches. And the first speaker is Professor Menno de Jong from University of Twente. And let me first of all give a brief introduction to Professor Menno. And Professor Menno is a full professor of technical and organization communication at the Department of Communication Science. His research focuses on the role communication plays in societal and organizational challenges. His research involves a variety of particularly relevant topics for which communication is studied in close relation to organizational characteristics, technological developments, and the affordances of design. And the title of his speech today is A Comprehensive Perspective on Technical Communication, Implications for Teaching and Research. So let's first of all warmly welcome Professor Menno to deliver his speech, please.
So I'm very honored to be here at the University of Macau, and I expect to learn a lot today from the other speeches, even though I feel a little bit sorry for the students who are translating for me, because there's a lot to translate, and I'm very eager to learn about the experiences and the views of the Chinese scholars on this topic of technical communication, technical translation, and artificial intelligence. Yeah, we at the University of Twente, we also struggle with the rise of artificial intelligence. We had our first incidents with students who did things with artificial intelligence that you should not do, actually. And I'm really curious how things will develop. What I like about my collaboration with China, well, I like many things about my collaboration with China, but one of the things I like very much is the fact that the field of technical translation entered into my view. So I've been focusing on technical communication for a long time. Even was the editor of the Technical Communication Journal of the Society of Technical Communication. But technical translation I didn't know so much about. And thanks to my collaboration with Gao Zhijun and others here at the University at the universities in China, I got familiar to some extent with technical translation. And I think that the combination of technical communication on the one hand and technical translation on the other hand is a very fruitful one. And I think in the Chinese context also a very obvious one. These are two fields that are connected somehow, and both of the fields have their own body of knowledge. I will not say anything, I will not say anything about the body of knowledge in translation, technical translation, because I think that all of you are better at that than I am. But I will tell something about the body of knowledge in technical communication, and I will try to sketch what kind of developments I see in the interface between technical communication and technical translation, and what the impact of artificial intelligence, in my view, should be. Of course, you may disagree, but I think in general, maybe this is a kind of spoiler, but I think in general that artificial intelligence calls for a focus on the higher types of competencies among communication professionals and translation professionals. So I think we eventually will be able to ask more of them and get to newer levels of achievement thanks to artificial intelligence. All right. Let me first say something about the body of knowledge in technical communication as I see it right now. A bird's eye view. Of course, I could talk for hours about what kind of research has been happening in technical communication. But here I made a listing of some of the things that I think are important. First of all, and that's way back when already, there was the distinction between reading to learn, reading to do, and reading to learn to do. Basically, the insight that when you help people use technology, for instance, when you try to instruct people, the reading is something completely different than when people are reading a novel or an informative text. And basically, that is the kind of basis under much of the things that we are doing in technical communication. We know that we have to support users in doing tasks with technology. That is a vital part of technical communication. Another thing is, and basically that's something we all know because we all do it. Exploratory user behavior. Whenever we buy a device, well, there may be one or few people here who would then first read all the instructions and then start to try to use it, but the majority will not. The majority will plug the machine in or start the software package and see what they can do. And that is something we have to take into account. That's a quite natural behavior. And as such, in technical communication, the whole approach of minimalism in software manual design became pretty popular. Software minimalism as an approach to accept and maybe even encourage exploratory user behavior. What's also very important is that technical instructions are often lengthy. There are lots of things, and people may only want to use the instructions that they need to be working on at the very moment. So findability of information, navigation are very crucial aspects in technical communication, and we must assume that people do not read linearly. People go from all the places in documents. Instructive style. That's another important thing that has been in the technical communication literature. Directness and conciseness, chunking of information are principles to help people to execute tasks with technical communication. Then there's attention for the switching between instructions on the one hand and tasks on the other hand. There's also a distinction that has been made between declarative information, which basically explains what kind of technology people are working with, and procedural information, which actually prescribes the steps that have to be taken to effectively use technology. And we've become aware that there's always an interplay between visuals and verbal information. I'm kind of interested to how that plays out in the translation area. So in technical communication, I think that visual communication can be quite important. So let's see how that works in translation. And then a last development I need to address is the use of motivational elements in instructions that help people to be motivated to use them and to be motivated to use the technology and also have confidence in their own abilities. And I think, even though it's a little bit old now, but I think that the article in Technical Communication by Hans van der Meij, Joyce Karreman, and Michael Steehouder offers a really excellent overview of what kind of developments have there been in the field. So this, you could say, this is where we stand with technical communication. And But I think, and that's the main point of what I want to address, we need to expand technical communication, and I have a couple of directions I think that we should consider when trying to expand the field. First of all, the default in technical communication, either explicitly or implicitly, is on written consumer instructions, like manuals or reference guides or quick starts or whatever. But we should realize that the repertoire of technical communication is much, much broader. For instance, Gao Zhejun, he made me aware of that a lot of technical communication actually is aimed for very specialized kind of users, maybe the developers. So he called that developer documentation, very specialized, lengthy documents that are very vital in the task that people have to do. But it's completely different, I would say, than the user instructions. Then there's the rise of instructional videos. So we're not only talking about textual material. No, many of the instructions nowadays are to be found online, and many users also prefer to have videos. Then, of course, there's embedded help information. Personally, I don't have many good experiences with that. Whenever I look for online help in a software package, I can never find exactly what I want. But still, it is a very promising thing. Then there's user-generated content. For instance, the online forums in which technical communicators increasingly also participate, either as a moderator or as an additional content provider whenever a question is being asked. And finally, there's social media. And I think that's a very interesting area of technical communication as well. On social media, it's not only on instructions about technology, but may also be that people are made aware of technological developments in the longer range or made interested in technological developments. And I would say technical communicators do themselves injustice if they don't try to contribute to that as well. Another expansion would be that we are gradually moving from, on the one hand, usability to user experience. And user experience is a more comprehensive kind of construct than usability. In usability, it's all about enabling people to effectively use technology with as much ease as possible and with as little annoyance as possible. So we're talking about the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. And that is something that has been guiding technical communication for a long, long time. But right now you can see that everywhere in the field, the concept is replaced by something like user experience, which is a much more comprehensive perspective. It is about people's responses and perceptions resulting from using technological products. And it even involves the anticipation of using the product, and it also involves whatever happens whenever you have a complaint about the product. It's a complete life cycle. And for technical communicators, this is something important, because I think we should be exploring to what extent our instructions, for instance, can help and increase the user experience. It's not only about making things effectively working for people, but it's also about giving them some kind of feeling. And that's an era in technical communication that we are now approaching, the era of user experience. By the way, I must say, there is you could say that user experience totally covers usability, but when I look at specific instruments about evaluating user experience, I think that the facilitating the use is a little bit underexposed in the very broad perspective on user experience. But this is certainly a development I see. There's some other developments. Attention to image, to trust, to privacy, and to awareness. First, let me talk about image. I did a research about people who were exposed to either an official manual of, I think it was Excel software, or a commercial manual, a manual that people have to pay for. Let's not forget, right? We think that technical writers are producing manuals that people don't want to use, but actually people tend to pay quite some money sometimes to buy commercial manuals. So we were looking at what's the image of the official manual compared to the commercial ones, and we see that the image of the official manuals is not that good compared to the commercial ones. And we also see, and that's the really interesting thing, that if the image is very positive, then the performance is also better, irrespective of which text they have used. So image is a part that we should start considering in technical communication. Then trust. In online communication, trust is a very important variable. Whether people trust a certain interface, whether people trust whatever kind of app you are offering to people. And the design of technical communication may contribute to the trust that people have. I put a reference here on the slide. There's quite some literature that shows how the interface, for instance, can enhance or maybe impede the trust of people. Then there's privacy. Privacy is something you could say is almost the opposite of trust. People should sometimes also distrust things. People should also be aware of what an app is doing with their personal data. And what we see is that people are not always aware of their privacy, or people do have views on their privacy, but in their actions don't show anything of that. So they say, well, privacy is very important to me, but whenever there's a free app and there's a lot of information about what it actually does in your phone, they will just download it and not read any of that information. That's called the privacy paradox. I think the whole topic of privacy is an excellent topic for technical communicators to be focusing on. And finally, I think that underuse is a topic in technical communication. We pay a lot of money to get all kinds of software packages, and we just use maybe 5 or 10% of them. And there may be a lot of functionality that is very useful to people, but we tend to not even be aware of that. So raising awareness is also something that we, as technical communicators, should think about. Basically, and that's also something in the literature, you see that there are people advocating that technical writers should not only be writing instructions, but actually should serve as a user's advocate. It's not only about writing the instructions, but it's also about preventing errors in technical designs. You could say, well, if you write the instructions, then you're putting Band-Aid on all the flaws in the design, but you can also help to prevent those kind of flaws in the design. And technical communicators are excellent people to be the user's advocate, because they have had to explain technology. That's the core of their competency. And they are, I think they should be, or maybe are, conducting user research, seeing how people are actually reacting to technology. And that makes them really excellent people to serve as a user's advocate. if you want to be an effective user's advocate, then you need knowledge about, for instance, technology acceptance and technology adoption. So what determines whether people are going to use technology or not? And you also need something about, well, basically it's related, the diffusion of innovations. So what characteristics of innovations are decisive in people's decision to start using it? And maybe even more important than that, appropriation of technology. So people, when they use technology, they basically co-shape the technology through their use. For instance, if I use Excel, it is not much more than a calculator and a sheet of paper in which I can put all kind of things. But if you look at people more in the financial area, they can do miracles with Excel. And learning about that is very important for technical communicators. I would also want to say that implementation processes need to be studied more in technical communication. So I don't know how it is in China, but I expect that it will not be much better in China than in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, whenever there's an innovation in organizations, like a new type of software people are using in the organization, or a total redesign of the interface or whatever, I think in more than half of the cases it is a gigantic failure. So how come? How can it be that in these high cost projects things go so wrong, and that we often end up with a product that's worse than what we started with? I think that the answer to that question lies in the implementation processes, and that we should be investigating how implementation of technological products can be done as effective and as efficient as possible. There may be two problems in current conceptions of implementation processes. One is that we see technology mainly as a transactional phenomenon, so that it is like, okay, it's a package of functionality, and people can use that or not use that. And we should adopt a more of an appropriation view on that, in which we see how people actively will use that technology. And the second one is that we may have a too narrow conception of the implementation process, because actually the implementation process starts with a decision to adopt a new system. And I think that in the first phases, a lot goes wrong in practice. But not only technical communication is expanding, I think that technical translation is also expanding. And two directions. First of all, there would be localization. Localization means that you adapt also the content of technical communication products to the new national context in which you have to function. I did some research with Zhang Xu, a former PhD student of mine. And in one of those studies, we looked at the use of social network sites of companies. And personally, I don't follow any social network site of a company, so I'm really fascinated by why people do that. So, but this research showed me something of that. So the question was, what do people do with corporate social media in terms of following, in terms of engaging with it? And we tried to compare China and Western countries. And what we found was that there's considerably more engagement, user engagement with corporate SNS than in China than in the Netherlands or than in Western Europe. And we also found that there's more social media dependency among the Chinese users than among the Western users. And we saw that the motives differ. So we saw that for Western users, transactional motives are the most important ones. And these are the kind of motives that don't really required to follow a corporate account. It's just, if you want to get some information, you can just search on the social media accounts and get that kind of information. It can be a one-time only thing. If you want to have entertainment, if you want to pass time, the same. You can just browse and end up somewhere. Whereas in Chinese users, the relational motives tend to be more important than for the Western users. And relational motives, that could be something like social integration, so that you are part of a community in which people are talking about the products of a company or about the company. And empowerment, that you have some kind of relation with the company, that whenever your own interests are threatened, that you can easily contact them and solve any problem that you might experience. So that is something, that's a difference in motives. And a corporate social network site is something different here in China than in the Western world. And we also saw, we were looking at, so that engagement, 5 minutes, yes. The engagement, how is that influenced? Well, we saw that engagement is influenced in two ways. First of all, via social network site dependence. So that is partly predicting the higher engagement. And the other one is social network, social integration motive. These are the things that are different. And whenever you're working on a corporate social network site on technical communication, you must realize that it's something completely different in China than in the Western world. And you have to adapt to that. That is one part that I would like to mention in terms of the expansion. The other is cultural adaptation. For instance, in a study I did with Li Chen, we found that Chinese user manuals differ from Western user manuals in several respects. They are less confined to the function of user support. In the Western world, we have a quite straightforward view. So you make a manual, you will instruct people. But in Chinese manuals, there is also commercial information. There's also information that is meant to entertain people a little bit or put them at ease. So that's a difference. And we also saw that in the Chinese manuals, the structure is fuzzier and less rigid than in the Western manuals. And we found that there were more non-instrumental, entertaining visuals. And so that leads to some kind of overall view that Western manuals are highly instrumental. There's no fun in Western manuals, generally speaking, and Chinese manuals are much more flexible. And so I'm not even sure where that comes from. Is it the difference in technical communication development, or is it the difference in cultural preferences? We still have to find that out. In general, if you would translate this into dimensions, then you could say the Chinese culture is more holistic, less focused on all kinds of small chunks of information. The Western culture is more analytic, and I would also say the Chinese culture is more analog, which means that there is it's not a 1-0 thing, but it's a scale. Just like I always compare it to driving on the highway in China. In the Netherlands, you are in a certain lane and you stay in that lane because that's your lane. And in China, you see people driving like this. So I think that there is something that may be deeper in that. And we also did user research, and we found no difference in effectiveness and appreciation for Chinese and the Western structure. We do see that in declarative text, Chinese prefer inductive structures and Western prefer deductive structures. And there's a difference in preference for illustrations. The Chinese people like the illustration there to the left much more than the Western people. And the Western people are very much interested in getting those very dry, straightforward blow-ups of aspects. Whoa, but now I'm going a little bit too fast. So to resume, implications for teaching and research. I think that a comprehensive technical communication program should go beyond the core of just writing instructions. We need to enrich the technical communicator with a broader view on the field. The rise of generative AI like ChatGPT reinforces that broad orientation. Many of the easy tasks can already be done by artificial intelligence. Further on, I say this again and again, technical communication is a very complex field in which humanities, engineering, and social sciences merge. And so when you have to talk about the broad orientation, it should have these three anchor points. And important for Chinese people, I would say the majority of the technical communication body of knowledge is based on Western research. We should find out whether that also applies to Chinese users in Chinese contexts. There's more research necessary about technical communication in China. And finally, more cross-cultural comparisons are needed. And people who want to explore that, I'm happy to talk further. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Menno, and thank you for your wonderful speech. It's quite comprehensive, instructive, and informative. So, Professor